Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
I'm KC.
And I'm Tyler.
And you're listening to
The Element Podcast.
What is happening, y'all? Guess what? It is the rut right now. Oh, my gracious. It is insane how ruddy things are. In fact, some big ruddy bucks have hit the ground on the element front, but you'll hear more about that later. Right now, we need to cover another topic. We need to talk to the man with the plan for funnels, that is. All right? Pinch points, funnels, all that stuff. We're going to be talking to our man, Jared Mills of Midwest Whitetail. We actually talked to Jared a little while back. It was probably, I don't know, mid-October or something, maybe even earlier than that. I don't remember, trying to get this stuff lined up because we were all so crazy busy this time of year. But he's got a lot of good stuff to say. And quite honestly, I feel like old Tyler Jones got a few good things to say about this stuff too, because he's a straight killer when it comes to this stuff.
I'm ready to hear what Jared has to say, frankly.
Are you?
Ready to hear it.
I'm ready to hear it. Oh, my goodness.
I was trying to figure out how I was going to use that.
Yeah? That's a pretty good way. I didn't catch it because you were so smooth.
Yeah. We're rutting around these days, and hopefully going to get some more rut tactics to help us kill some rutted up deer. Yeah,
let's talk a little bit about rut dates right quick, because quite frankly, a lot of y'all are already crying because it's November 14th right now when we're recording this, and it's like, well, rut's over. I guess I'll see you guys in 2022.
School of Bill Winky
right there. That's right, man. Bill, by the way, killed a giant. Did you see that thing?
Yes, I did.
Oh, my gosh, huge. With some crazy tactics. Maybe we might need to talk to him about that one of these days. But
maybe not.
I feel as if out of all the rut tactic stuff we have talked about and are going to talk about, pinch points and funnels and the like are really the thing that can apply throughout the month of November. Because as those bucks leave their first does that they found in week 2 or whatever of November, it's like it all happens all over again, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like a post-lockdown type thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would almost say that a funnel or a pinch would be maybe even the most effective in that latter half of November, you know, just because the deer, they just get crazier and crazier as November goes on in their mind. And it's just I don't know, I'm trying to think of a way to relate this to people, but for me personally, there are times when I have a task at hand and I just head down and start doing it, and you even get exhausted at one point, or you're tired, or your mental capacity is draining, and but you just keep plugging, and because you're in that zone and you're really doing good work, you're getting it done, you're just not quite done, right? And so I feel like deer are kind of like that, where later in the month, they figured out exactly where these does are hanging out throughout the year, and they know where they can go check these little doe bedding areas. So they literally have no food, no fat on them, and they're still just in a zombie status, just going to check doe bedding. You know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about hanging out in those areas, guys. Here's what you need to do: you need to hang out in a rut funnel in a saddle.
That's right.
Hang out from the tree and shoot a big buck.
Yeah, not a topographical saddle.
No. In a cruiser saddle, a tree saddle, thing that you need to sit in. And let me tell you, if you're going to do some rut hunting, especially this time of year, spending time in the woods is super important. Like, we were looking at trail cameras the other day, and like at 120, there was a shooter buck in there. Man, it's hard to be at someplace in 120 in Texas. But if you're going to do that, you got to make sure you're comfortable. And you're going to be able to do that out of a cruiser saddle. So be sure and check those out if you haven't at, what is Cruiser's website, Tyler?
Cruiser.shop, I think.
Cruiser.shop.
Yeah.
So if you just Google cruiser saddles, you can get to that. But how do you explain, I guess for me, just for a quick little rundown, you killed in a pinch point in 2019 in Iowa, right? How did you find that pinch point?
Basically, looking at bigger blocks of timber and seeing a spot where they kind of connect. But one way to do that is following creek systems along the maps. I think that's a good way to just start, is to go, because along that creek is going to be different, ag fields and whatever else it might be that are going to pinch it down or neck it down to, thinner areas. And as bow hunters, this is the most important thing, really, because we only have, 30, 40 yards on each side of us that we're really feeling comfortable about shooting. So if you can find something that's in that 100-yard width range or less, then that really helps you, or me at least, it helps feel confident about sitting in that spot, especially during the rut.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the main tools for me doing that is using OnX. That line distance tool for that is something that I use all the time.
Me too.
We go way out and we look at, like you're talking about, like blocks of timber or whatever, but then you can zoom in, find that pinch point on the map. Hopefully it's one that you feel confident about and you don't think that guys are all over or whatever, but then you can use that line distance tool and see, like how far it is from the creek to the edge of the timber or whatever. And if it's, in that 100, 120-yard range, something like that, I mean, that's a pretty good pinch point. You can't shoot the whole thing, but you can go in there with some boots on the ground scouting and really feel pretty good about it. So,
another thing I use that line distance tool for is, it's in the same vein, but so you can see the trail sometimes on a map in that funnel, So if you see the trail and it's 50 from a tree that you're like, I could hang in that tree, then you're going to be like, oh, I've got to figure something different out there, right? So a little, at least you're eliminating trees that, or if you say that's 30, then you can say that's the tree. I'm going to go right to that tree. I'm not going to leave any ground scent. I'm going to be as efficient as possible going into this place.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite honestly, for me, sometimes that's made the difference in hanging in a tree or hunting on the ground. Because, I mean, there might be the best saddle hanging tree you ever seen 60 yards from the trail, but you probably shouldn't just bet on that. You want to be a lot closer, than that. So it's a way you can kind of go in, plan on the gear you need to bring in with you, and yada, yada. So be sure and check out OnX Maps, guys, if you hadn't. And I tell you what, we probably should just stop talking about these pinch points because we've done it a little bit, but man, Jared Mills is just... That's how you say it too, by the way. Meals.
Yeah. Eric's sitting here making fun of us, but
but he is the master of this, dude, and he can see these things. Even like, for instance, it was like late December last year, right in the snow, and like the dude found a pinch point literally in cut beans or whatever it was, you know, and found a way to set up and increase his probability of shooting a giant buck, and he did just that. So
he's a silent assassin, man.
Oh my goodness, yes, and like I feel like Jared when he kills a big buck. Everybody has like their cameraman tackle or whatever that, we do. I feel like Jared's like just nice little shoulder pat,
His love tap for you, man.
That's right. Yeah. He's just so chill, man.
Man, that was so cool.
That's right. Cool.
He's an awesome dude, though. We really appreciate Jared coming on over the years and doing some of these things with us because, man, a guy that kills that much has just got a lot to give to us, man. So we appreciate that. And with that, let's get him on the phone. All right, so now on the phone, we've got Jared Mills from Midwest Whitetail. It's been a while, Jared, but we really appreciate you coming back on, man.
It has been a while. It's good to chat with you guys again. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, dude. I mean, this is it's mutual that we enjoy being on this podcast with you because you, man, you kill some big deer every year. It seems like you kill at least one, and I'll be honest with you, man. I have texted this to KC so he can vouch for me. the Big Ten in the snow from the ground last year may be the best hunt I've ever seen on video, man.
It was, as you guys know, it was one of the rare occasions where everything works out, even from like a video perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've had some really cool stories on big deer over the years, but for everything, our favorite is the storytelling, and when we can match up the video component with the story, it's pretty rare. And that was one of those occasions where it worked out, and that one will be hard to beat for sure.
Yeah. So who was the camera guy? Because I felt like he nailed it with like bare hands and everything, man.
Yeah, it was not an ideal setup for a cameraman, but his name was Connor Clark. He was an intern with us last year. He grinded it out with me all season, and it'd be fun to always go back and like get some interviews from those guys that get to tag along with us for a season, and just the grind. I mean, it's nothing. They all say it's nothing like they expected. It's so much work, and there's nothing easy that we do. Mm-hmm. But he did a really good job capturing that one.
Yeah, he did. So are you and Mike still co-owners in that river property?
We are, yeah.
Cool.
And Mike has purchased a good amount of ground over the past couple of years in that surrounding area. So while I still only have the one piece, you know, he's kind of locked up some of the other areas, other properties around the area. So we both spend a lot of time in that spot. That's
awesome, dude. That's you know, I know that's a kind of different than what we're talking about today, maybe a little bit. But maybe this plays in. I don't know, you know, what all surrounds you there necessarily, but we wanted to talk about food source and destination food source, mainly how that plays into the strategy of hunting in the rut. You know, why do you use a food source in the rut to either hunt on or predict movement? And then we'll talk about how you do that as well.
Yeah, so you brought up destination food sources. Destination food sources can be a tough one, especially a tough one to give a blanket answer on, because that destination food source means something different across the country. And I'll speak to what I have experience on here in the Midwest. In Iowa, obviously, we have a lot of agricultural land, and those, they're usually picked by the rut. So those picked ag fields are usually the destination food sources during that November timeframe. And most of my properties don't actually have tillable ground on them. So usually the destination food sources are not on the property that I'm hunting. But they're still very, very important for me to know and understand, because a lot of times they dictate the direction of movement for the deer on the property. So, you know, if the destination food source is to the north, a lot of times the evening movement will be the deer moving from south to north, and in the mornings it'll be from north to south back into the bedding areas. Mm-hmm. So it's important for me to understand where those destination food sources are. And I know a lot of guys hunt properties that have the picked ag fields on them. The other challenge with destination food sources is that they're typically larger and harder to bow hunt. You know, you're gonna have to just pick the right location or figure out where the deer are entering that field to have success from a bow hunting standpoint. I personally would rather hunt just off of it, either an inside corner or maybe there's a little finger of cover that connects up to it. I'd rather be back there for a couple of reasons. One, you're shortening the distance that the deer is going to walk, more likely going to be in bow range. But two, a lot of times they don't get to those destination food sources until after dark. And so you need to be a little bit closer to the bedding area, between the bedding area and the destination food source, to catch a mature buck in daylight hours. Even during the rut, mm-hmm. They still likely don't get to those bigger food sources where they spend their overnight hours until after dark.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about predicting what food source would be hot? So for instance, for us, this is still a concept that we're not super familiar with because we didn't grow up in corn and bean country. So, mm-hmm. You know, we've always heard different things really about beans and when they're actually, you know, most palatable or most desired. And do you find that there are times when deer are moving from a bean source to that where they prefer corn and then back to beans later, or like how does that all work out? Like what's the dynamic between beans and corn?
Yeah, so early on, like October timeframe, the deer aren't on the beans too hard. There's a period where they hit it really hard when it's green, and when it starts to yellow and turn brown, they usually choose other food sources. But then when it's all dried out and it gets a little bit later, I would say November, I would categorize that as later. It becomes a good food source again. It's a good source of protein for the deer and energy for the deer. I personally don't have a preference between corn and beans. A lot of times, just whatever I have to hunt on, I see the deer on. Mm-hmm. Guys that have the luxury of planting both side by side would probably argue with me and say, no, corn is king. Corn's way better, this time of year or whatever. But I've seen throughout all November and into the late season a bean food source just be killer. So I like both of them. It depends just what you have and what's in proximity to your hunting location. But that's just me speaking from my personal experience over the years. I like both, just whatever is accessible for your deer and for you to hunt.
Something I've been seeing across a lot of more than the northern states as we visit more states is how underrated alfalfa is. Do you have much alfalfa around where you're at, and what do you think about that as a food source during the rut?
So we don't have a ton, but we do have some. I think it can be a good destination food source. I will say that once that first frost hits here, we don't tend to see as many deer on the alfalfa. They usually move to a different food source like corn or beans, and that first frost usually is in October sometime.
Gotcha.
Here in Iowa.
Yeah. We definitely experienced a very frosty couple days in late October a couple years back, and a blizzard. So it's definitely an earlier time of year. Now, what about cut corn as opposed to standing corn? Is there any difference as far as preferential, deer food there?
Yeah, this one's interesting. So cut corn, especially the first few days after it's cut or after it's picked, it's on fire. I mean, almost every deer in the neighborhood will hit that freshly picked corn agricultural field. But even beyond that first few days, there's something about feeding on corn that's on the ground as opposed to on a stalk that deer prefer. If you had a standing cornfield and you were to mow it and scatter the kernels, they are like, it's like a magnet for the deer to go to those instead of picking off the kernels. So, where standing corn becomes advantageous is when you start getting snow on the ground and whatever, they can't, reach the kernels. But the picked ag fields, even though there's not as much grain as compared to a standing grain field, they seem to still really like those throughout the entire November timeframe.
Gotcha. And so according to the DNR officer, if you shred standing corn, that is not illegal, but if you dump it out of a bag, it is illegal. That's how it works in Iowa, right?
I think so. I personally don't do either one, but from what I've heard from other people, it can vary from DNR officer.
That's fun.
Yeah, exactly. The issue becomes mowing it versus knocking it down. Again, this is just from what I've heard, but people have said that DNR officers like, hey, I'm good with you, like running it over, knocking it down. But actually mowing and scattering the grains would be the thing that crosses the line. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's
fun stuff.
It's one of those things that just just better off to check with whoever your local game warden is.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk some about, how you would hunt these food sources now. So, you kind of made the distinction between destination and transitional earlier. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so what I would call like a transitional food source, or some people call it staging. It's the food source that's usually a little smaller, but usually closer to their bedding area. It's the thing that they're going to hit in the afternoons, first thing when they get out of their bed before they make their way. And it's usually something that's on the way to the destination food source. So those are great areas. One, just because the deer are getting there earlier and you have a better chance of catching a buck in daylight. Two, they're easier to bow hunt. So kind of that opposite contrast of what I was talking about, the challenges of a destination food source earlier. You have those advantages with a staging plot or transitional plot. I like to, even though those are smaller, sometimes I don't like to hunt on them either. I like to hunt off of them on the downwind side, preferably like an inside corner, because people don't realize that bucks don't have to come into a food source to check does or to do a scent check. I mean, they can be 100 yards off of it. Usually not quite that much, but that's 75 to 100 yards is a good kind of distance that I would like to hunt from that food source if I'm not on it. So just kind of downwind side where a buck might cruise, maybe find a trail or something that pinches them a little bit closer. That's always a good spot to set up during the rut. The rut, the bucks still do feed. I mean, people sometimes think that they just run around for a month and don't feed. They do still feed. They have to. Mm-hmm. But usually that feeding is still driven by where the does are at and the buck's searching for the doe. So keep that in mind when you're hunting these plots, is the bucks will come in them, but a lot of times they don't have to, especially during midday hours. They're not going to walk out in the open for the most part. They're going to scent check it while staying in the cover. Yeah.
So you killed a big, I guess, 10 a few years back. That was like 186 or something like that. Was that, I'm trying to remember, was that like kind of one of those instances where you're like, you could kind of see a field through the trees or whatever, and you were hunting a deer that was scent checking or something like that? Or how was that different, completely different thing that I'm thinking of?
The 186 in 2016 was just more of a just a small woodlot that the deer seemed to travel through, just going from one piece of cover to another piece of cover. So it was more just like a connecting woodlot. But going back a few years before that, I killed a 183, and that was more of that situation. It was a morning hunt. I was in the cover, but you could see out in the open where the deer were coming back from their feeding areas, and I was able to call out that deer and bring him back into the cover. He was following a couple does, but they obviously weren't hot does, but he was still in the mood to come check stuff out. So.
Yeah. So when you go to hunt something like that, an inside corner, some part of the transitional process between bed and feed, are you deciding to go in there and hunt because of trail camera data usually, or are you driving and seeing deer in the back of a field? And, how do you decide this is where a deer is and this is where he's coming out and this is why I'm going to hunt, 300 yards back in the woods or whatever it is?
Yeah, more of that's just from experience. The trail cameras really help me determine that a deer is in the general area. But I don't like to put them right on the exact trail I'm trying to hunt just to make sure. I mean, I just know from experience that the bucks are going to take that path that's on the inside corner of that food plot when it's downwind for them to walk by it. That's just more of an experience thing. But the trail cameras really help me to know, okay, the deer is within this couple 100-yard, 400 or 500 yard vicinity, spending time in this area. He seems to be going back into bed in this spot. Here's where I can kill him. That it's just more of just understanding how the deer use a certain property more than it is the trail camera saying, hey, he's right here, go kill him right here.
Right. If you're hunting one of these transitional style food sources, the one that's kind of on the way or on the way back from, I guess that's kind of my question. Is this more of a morning or an evening setup, or is there at least some consideration for both that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so like the closer you get to the evening destination food or the destination food source, I think it's almost exclusively an evening or afternoon sit. The closer you get to the bedding, you can get away with morning sets. I still don't love hunting field edges in the mornings. I just think that you're limiting yourself to the amount of action you have in a morning hunt. So if you're hunting on a food source, whether it be transitional or a destination food source, the window of action is very small, and it's smaller the further you get away from the bedding. Where if you're back in the timber, the bedding, your action could be all morning long. I mean, the deer that's where they're moving to. That's where they're going to spend their entire morning. I'd rather be there and have a greater chance of encountering the deer I want, and just being in the deer more rather than, banking on that first hour of daylight, let's say, if you're on a field edge.
Yeah, that makes good sense, man. I kind of have this thing where we grew up in Texas, so a lot of times mornings are pretty good because it's the cooler part of the day, and it's still really hot in the evening, so I always have an affinity for mornings, but sometimes I need to kind of put some of that stuff, on the back burner and just do a better job of knowing what to do in the situation depending on where you're at in the country, hunting the rut.
Right. For sure. It varies a lot. And again, I can only really speak to my experience here in the Midwest, but I'm sure there's different scenarios like the one you mentioned that needs to play into someone's decision of where to hunt in morning versus evening.
One of the big things with the rut, of course, is where does are. Right, and because that's what the bucks are looking for. Whenever you are thinking about food sources, are you truly thinking about a spot where a buck would like to go and feed, and that's how you're going to shoot him? Or are you trying to find a place that the does are frequenting and figuring that the bucks are going to come to that as well?
Yeah, the does for sure. I'll focus on the food source that the does want, and then how do I hunt that food source for a buck? And that kind of plays along with the example of saying, hey, the deer really focusing on this brassica or clover field, whatever it is. How can I hunt a buck come in to scent check this field for these does? And that's kind of how I think about it. So the does will drive the decision, and then you kind of dive deeper onto how do you kill the buck that's coming to scent check, or how's he getting to that plot where I can intercept him, that type of thing.
Yeah, sweet, dude. Well, I'm excited for the season, man. I'm excited to see what you get done up there in Iowa and elsewhere. Are you going to go hunt any other states this year?
I'm pretty much done traveling unless I happen to tag out early, which is unlikely. But I started in Kentucky this year and just got back.
You killed a deer like within 2 hours in Kentucky, right?
Last year I did.
Oh, that was last year. Okay.
This year I didn't kill anything. We had some good hunts and close calls, but we're always one step behind them.
Yeah, I'm getting the chasing November hunts mixed in with the 2021 hunts in my head. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, sweet.
Unfortunately, lightning didn't strike twice.
That's all right, man. You're gonna kill plenty of big ones, so it's okay if you don't get.
You've been struck by lightning before.
That's right. It's more like, unfortunately, lightning didn't strike for the 17th time or something, right? Anyways, dude, really love what y'all do with Midwest Whitetail and can't wait to see how this season goes for you. If people, of course they should be, but if they're not, can you tell them where to go find what y'all will be putting out this year?
Yeah, so our Midwest Whitetail is all semi-live stuff, so you'll be watching hunts that take place within, a couple of days of when we air them. But you can follow it on our YouTube channel, Midwest Whitetail, or our website, MidwestWhitetail.com. And we're also on a lot of different other platforms like Realtree 365, Waypoint, Amazon. So wherever you like to watch your content, there's a good chance you'll find either Midwest Whitetail or Chasing November or both.
Awesome, dude. Well, that's awesome. Ready to go watch some of that actually probably this afternoon because I haven't finished Chasing November from 2020 yet. So anyways, man, I hope you have a killer season and just smoke a bunch of giants, and maybe one of them will be on one of these food sources that we're talking about today.
There's a good chance.
Man, Jared just knows, man. Like he's been in. The thing about growing up and being in deer country like that is you learn so much. We talk about this a lot. Like, it's tough to kind of learn stuff in East Texas sometimes because you may go out like y'all did last night and not see a deer, And
thanks for telling me in the world that happened.
And we hadn't really revealed this yet, but we actually have a multi-mobile trail camera down there that's sending cell pictures, and there was a buck in there that y'all ran out going in that was in there early, and there was actually a buck in there at 1 p.m. yesterday as well.
And yesterday morning as well when I had prior family engagements that did not allow me to go. Man, alive. Good information being sent there. And honestly, even in we talked about this, but without that cell camera being there, we would have never known the mistakes that we even made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
But it is a handy thing to have, and we've got it on a pinch right now. It's a creek crossing, and everything kind of necks down to it right there, and that's where they want to cross. And what I, really think that is good this time of year, if you're listening, you're like thinking about hunting a pinch or a funnel or whatever, if nothing else, get a camera out into the woods right now. Like we've got those Moultrie cameras out. We've got a bunch of them right now, and get them out there, because what you'll end up getting is not necessarily something, and we're not even necessarily using these trail cameras this year. And what we're doing is we've like got these spots that have come from past trail camera years. And so what I'm saying is like historical data, and knowing that, man, the last 2 years on November 14th has been crazy on our cameras in East Texas. And that lets you know you need to be out there on November 13th, 14th, 15th, or this happens during this part of the year. And this is actually where the deer first transition out of summer into, or whatever. And that can help you in early season. So, but right now in the rut, to put these things in funnels is a good way to know when the actual heart of the seek phase is, where deer are seeking does. Bucks are seeking does. So
they're seeking window?
No, they're not. No, they're seeking all the does they want, actually.
All of them, that's right.
And they're not seeking them in urban environments. They're seeking them wherever they want. So
that's right. No, it's a good point, man, for sure. And I think that as kind of the rut pushes on for us, we in the South, we're kind of in a little bit different deal, even more so than like in the deep South. We're talking to Mark from Moultrie, or I was the other day, and their rut is still about a month away, which is wild.
It's exciting, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It means that the season's still going on, and that's who was I telling that to? Somebody, but it's like, man, compared to a lot of people, like we're still looking forward to the next month and a half, because things just drag on where we're at, and you never know when it might get hot. Another reason to have mobile cameras out, that way you're like, oh, it's popping again, December 12th, let's go, or whatever. Yeah. But anyways, I think that those are great times, like you were saying, to focus in and key in on this pinch point stuff, man. And I think that we just came back from a pretty successful trip. Y'all be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't, because the 14th, actually, I'm going to try to get this podcast out. That way y'all know to get out and go watch this video, because it's about to get wild. We saw probably the biggest buck we've ever seen on public land in this video.
Biggest buck ever?
Yeah, I think that's what we should put in the title. So be sure and subscribe so you can check that out. Do all that other stuff too if you are a big-time YouTube user, like the bell and all that stuff. I don't really know how that works, but you should do it.
Subscribe here on the podcast as well, too, if you haven't, if you're a new listener, because we're going to tell the stories on the podcast.
That's right. Listening. Yeah, here pretty quickly. But Tyler, Eric, and I are all fixing to hit the road. They're headed to some crazy undisclosed location at the moment, and I'm going to do the same, but we're headed different directions. And we're going to go try and kill us a mid to late November buck or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever we can this week. So, guys, keep hunting. If you haven't, don't lose your energy. If you need to take a day to refuel, by all means do that. Make sure you're keeping everything straight at home, because it's going to pay off in the long run. You might miss a day here and there, but it sure would be better than your wife shutting you down for the rest of the season or whatever. And before you just be like, well, I'd tell my wife what to do. Yeah, right, bro. Yeah, right. That's what I have to say to you. But anyways, all jokes aside, make sure you're keeping it all straight on the home front. That way you can get out there and shoot straight on the hunting front. And remember, this is your element.
Liberty.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24th, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula, May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington, May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon, and May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.